Brilliant. Okay, so thanks for persevering for the sound check and video check earlier just now. My name is Ben. Been working for Ideal Homes for a few years now, and I've lived in Spain for many years. I used to live in the Costa del Sol, and from there I moved over to Portugal, and now living in the Costa Blanca. And Spain has always been a country very close to my heart for many reasons. And the main reason being is the lifestyle. For me, it very much fit into where I was, where I've been growing up since, sort of my early 30s all the way up to now, which seems like yesterday. And I think that's the great thing about Spain is that there's something for everyone. So there's different areas of Spain which will give you a complete contrast to maybe what you're expecting other areas to offer. There's traditional areas, places that are very much more sort of sitting around the Spanish Square and sort of having a siesta and taking it very more sort of traditional and cultural. And then you've got the areas which I'm sure many people have heard or have even seen the program, such as Benidorm, which are sort of your party town and places where you can sort of go for a stag do, hen night, or just basically go for a long weekend. So the reason what brought me over to Spain initially was working for a real estate company that allowed me to travel and see Spain for the first time ever, and I was pleasantly surprised. One of the things that really stuck out for me was how much more family oriented it is. You see kids of all ages running around 10, 11 o'clock while the parents are eating. No one bats an eyelid. Children are like kings and queens here. They're treated like royalty. They can never make enough noise. And it's nice to see. And having now 3 kids of my own and wanting to provide a safe environment and a healthy lifestyle for them, this was for me a number one pick, a number one choice. So what we're going to do today is kind of really discuss a little bit more about Spain and what it's like living here, what it's like to visit here for any of you who haven't been here before. And then we're going to take some questions, try and get those questions answered, obviously in this group discussion in group forum, and then if not, on a one-to-one basis. So what it's like living here? Well, obviously I think the UK at the moment is going or experiencing or due to experience a heat wave. We are experiencing one now at the moment. The temperatures have dramatically changed in the last 3 days, and the weather at the moment is absolutely awesome. Despite my video looking very dark, and I'm not sure why, the sun is out and it's in full force. The sun is out usually over 300 days in a year, and when the sun's out, and I'm sure you would agree over where you are, people's personalities change. So people tend to be a little bit more happier. They tend to be bit more jovial and in positive spirits. And there's no difference here. If you've got the sun, the sea, and the sand, and you've got good food, and you've got that type of atmosphere and environment, you're going to feel at your best. And I think that's the reason why so many people tend to come over to stay here long term and to retire here, because they're wanting a higher quality of life. They don't want to feel like they're sort of going to work and it's dark. They're coming back home and it's dark. They're finding that the cost of living is very high. It's not going very far. You have to pay more for less. And they're wanting to try and optimize as much as possible whatever the resources they have left. So there's 2 main sort of areas that we tend to look into here on the sort of Costa Blanca, including Murcia. So Costa Blanca, it ranges from Denia, which is north of Alicante Airport, and then it will go right the way down to an area called Pilar de la Horedada. Now that area is just on the cusp of Murcia, and then from there you've got Murcia right the way down to Mar Menor, La Manga, and sort of going down to the Costa Calida area. Now these 2 areas have kind of merged into one over recent years. You tend to find that most people, if they visit one, will visit the other. And the 2 are ever so slightly different. Obviously the weather and the climate is the same, but even down, for instance, the buying costs are completely different. The environment is completely different. So living here, you'll find that in Murcia, it's a little bit more traditional. It's more residential. You've got slightly more number of better schools here. You've got, I would probably say 90% of the people who actually live here full-time are Spanish. So you haven't got such a huge expat community here. Whereby in Alicante, it's a slightly different process. It's a slightly different experience. Alicante is slightly busier, and you'll find that a lot of the cities, cities by the beach, cities by the coast. So you've got Torrevieja as one of them, as one of the more well-known areas. This is right by the coast, but it's like having a city on the sand. So it's quite busy, it's quite metropolitan, quite unique in itself. But some people find that it's too busy to live. So they would rather be in traveling distance to somewhere like that, but not necessarily live somewhere like that. Hence why Murcia tends to be quite a nice bet. It's a little bit quieter, as I say. The building regulations are different. So you won't have huge tall skyscrapers or, large buildings, condominium buildings of, sort of 7, 8 floors high. It can only build up to 4 floors high. So you'll find that the whole area is a little bit more spacious in its feel. The schools here, yes, there's schools for people who do not speak, or for children who do not speak English Spanish as a first language, who maybe only speak English. So yes, you can definitely have a choice of schools, whether it be private or public. For me personally, we opted to go for a public school. The main reason being is obviously the language, and kids being sponges, and how quickly they learn is always quite astonishing to me. But we wanted them to try and get as much of the Spanish language down as possible. And after research and speaking to parents who have been through the process, we found that the easiest way was to throw them in at the deep end, and they will soon find their feet. So that's what we opted to do. But there is, again, huge numbers of schools in different areas and locations. And if that's something that you need more information on, then we'll be more than happy to kind of maybe discuss school options with you and kind of go through the different options and see which one is best. So people say, living here is always mañana, mañana, mañana. That's the most common question regarding living here that gets thrown towards me. So there is an element of that, but within good reason. It gets very, very hot during the summer. And for that reason, and obviously for the safety of workers, they have to take things at a slower pace, because otherwise, people could be fainting, etc. It could be quite, it could be quite dangerous if you're not sort of taking care of that. So there is an element of mañana, mañana, but what I will say is the craftsmanship, the workmanship from the tradesmen, the local tradesmen here, all the services and amenities, everything is done to a very, very high standard. So the hospitality that you'll get from hoteliers, from restaurateurs, from even taxi drivers is fantastic. People are very open to tourism, to people coming over from most countries within Europe, but also obviously outside of Europe. And the service that you get is brilliant. It really is. There's always a reason for the Spanish to party, which is nice. There's always a feria, or there's always something to celebrate. There's always someone to commemorate. There's just always a reason. And for that reason, I always think that the locals are in always a very positive sort of mind frame. If there's a bank holiday, they're going to be enjoying that bank holiday. For instance, obviously due to what's happening globally, and we're not able to walk freely at the moment. We have a neighbour who quite happily plays loud music at the same time every day. The same set of songs, and you hear people clapping. It's traditional Spanish music, and it kind of just lifts your spirits a little bit. And that's just synonymous with the people here. For people to live here and not have Spanish as a first language, is that a problem? Absolutely not, no. I always think it's nice to try, even if you just try with the pronunciation of a word, then it just shows that you're trying, And sooner or later, you do tend to pick up the odd phrase that tends to help with your day-to-day life here, and little by little, you'll start to pick up the language. I know people that are living here who have lived here for, over 10 years, and they do not speak much Spanish at all. The main reason being is they just work in an environment and live in an area which doesn't command it. So they've never really had a need to pick it up. But within that said, I mean, there's so many different nations residing here. You have people from Belgium, people who speak Dutch, people who speak French, people who speak all sorts of languages who actually live here full time. So I think English is probably the second most common language spoken here. So if you don't have Spanish and you have English, you'll find that you can live here day to day with no problems whatsoever. And that's from opening a bank account, applying for NIE numbers, applying for school positions, whatever it might be. So there's definitely no reason to have Spanish as a first or even a second or even a third language. Would I say that living here is a good move? And for most people, yes, I do think for most people, for what you're looking for, and obviously that's dependent on your own personal circumstance. But we moved over, and when I moved over the first time to live in the Costa del Sol, I never really looked back. Just the kind of flow of life, the ease of access, the road systems, everything was stressless. And I come from London, where things are a little bit busier. People don't have much time for each other. And if you was to say hello to someone in London, they would probably think that you're a little bit crazy or that you're up to no good. But here it's just the norm, to say hello to your neighbor in the morning. We have local bread delivered to our door. They do pastries and all sorts of things. And all the neighbors will kind of congregate for a 5-minute chit chat. And again, in English and in Spanish and also in Dutch. There's a few Dutch neighbors here. And everyone just gets on. And there's no real sort of problems in this, as much as what I found living in London, and where everyone was kind of going at 100 miles an hour. And for some people that suits. And if you're you have the city in you, then maybe you're more inclined, but you can definitely find the city atmosphere. Why not have that on the beach, in the sun? You get the best of both worlds. Do I feel healthier? Absolutely. With a healthier cuisine, you got the vitamin D from the sun. It's brilliant. It's fantastic. And again, it's the reason what really sort of motivated me to do the move was to create a healthier climate and environment for my children. And I feel like living here is achieving that. So that's the reason why I am here, and a little bit more about Spain. In terms of accessibility to Spain, the most common way to travel is obviously by plane, although there are routes by car people take on a regular basis. You have 2 international airports. One is Alicante Airport. That's roughly, I would say, probably equates to about, I would say 85 to 90% of the tourism for the area, because it's the bigger and far more established airport than Murcia Airport, which is roughly about an hour and 45 minutes south of Alicante Airport. So the great thing there is Murcia never had an airport before. It was a shared airport with a military airport zone. But now we've got our own dedicated international airport. It means 2 things. One, accessibility into the area is going to be greatly heightened to the point of you're going to find that there's going to be more people residing here full time. You're going to find there's going to be more holiday makers in the area, and that's going to play wonders for many reasons. But the 2 most popular ones is cost of properties are going to go up for people who do invest early. And also, you're going to find that amenities and ease of access to shops, bars, restaurants, hairdressers, cinema, whatever you need, is going to improve. So at the moment, it's by no way near perfect. They still have a lot more renovation work to do on some of the older buildings, and also start to improve the number of shops within a certain radius. But that's all going to happen as interest is improving over the next coming years, with now the international airport proving an option for people to get to the area. Most people will travel to Alicante because there is more flights from more destinations, but if you can travel from Murcia and just stay in Murcia, you'll probably find that you're only going to be 20 minutes to maybe at a stretch half an hour away by car to your place of residence. So again, if you are sort of looking at this from a relocation project or something that you want to do, maybe rent it out for the next 5, 10, 15 years, but with the view of retiring here and using your property full time, but obviously in between that time, rent the property out, and hopefully that will cover its own face or even possibly pay the property off, then have Murcia as a definite option, because I really do feel that over the next 15 to 20 years, things are going to improve dramatically. and it's going to be the next buzz place where Alicante once was. So hopefully that gives you a little bit more of an insight into Spain, into living here. I'm not sure if any of you guys have actually been on holiday here, or if you have any plans on visiting the area as soon as you obviously possibly can. But the best way to do it would be by plane. In terms of road networks, you've got the N332, so that just goes right the way from Denia, right the way through the Costa Blanca, and you would even take you into Murcia with a range of toll roads there as well. So driving, again, you don't have to be, obviously now everyone has sat navs in their car. You find it very, very easy. The road system, the road network here is very easy. So from food to lifestyle to weather, for me personally, it was just one tick after another. And for people that visit the area, from when we pick them up at the airport and we show them a range of properties, we always get a positive rather than a negative. I think people are pleasantly surprised if they haven't been here before, and even more so surprised if they have maybe a few years ago and seen what has happened in recent years in terms of rejuvenation of areas. All right, so hopefully that gives you a bit more of an idea and gives you a bit of a taster in terms of what the Costa Blanca has to offer. And what we can do now is really start to take some questions from you and see if there's anything that I can answer. If there isn't, we can also communicate on a one-to-one basis as well.
Hey, Ben, thanks for that. What about healthcare? People have asked questions about healthcare. What's that like over there?
Okay, now that's a very, very good question. Healthcare. Okay, so at the moment as it stands, you can actually be in, obviously, with the whole Brexit issue. That's a question that I cannot give you an absolute certainty on. However, as it plays out for the rest of this year, you can obtain a healthcare card, which will give you the exact same treatment as if you were living here as a full-time resident. But that's only up until the end of this year. After that, nobody quite knows. It depends on what deals get struck and how that's kind of pans out. So unfortunately, I can't go into too much info in terms of how healthcare works, although what I can say is the healthcare system is fantastic. If you need to buy a lot of the drugs like you have a prescription for in the UK, you can bring that prescription over here and you can still carry on that facility. Are they quick? Yes. Do they speak English? Yes. To be honest, I can't fault them. There are a few differences, like some of the drugs that you would need a prescription for back home, you may be able to buy over the counter and vice versa. So there are a few things you may need to check out, but as a whole, the hospital systems here are fantastic. I've had to use them once before and they were quick and easy. And you also have the option of paying private, which is what a lot of people who are a little bit conscious as to what Brexit may entail, they're actually paying private. And it's not a huge sum of money if you get in early enough and you don't have any existing ailments. But you can actually go private and get the same facilities as you would, but just obviously in a quicker space of time. So for healthcare is great, fantastic, used the system before, very quick, very similar to how it is obviously in the UK. As it will change from next year, stay tuned. That's the only thing I would suggest. It's not going to change dramatically, but there may be a few things and documentation that may need to be had. The best thing I can say really is become a resident, and that will give you more of the options as time goes forward.
Okay, thank you. I guess it's a bit of a waiting game, really, isn't it? We've had a question in from Bonnie about visas and residence permits. Would you mind talking a little bit about that?
Sure. So with regards to residency, the first thing that you would need, and the first thing you need if you want to buy a property, or if you want to open a bank account, even get a mobile phone, is you need something called an NIE number, which is just basically your tax number. Then once you've got your NIE number, that will then allow you to be seen in the eyes of the government, and then you can apply for your residency. Now, your residency, depending on which region you're in, who you use, and how long you've been in Spain will vary. So I know clients of mine who have been in and out of the process within 6 weeks, And I know people who are still waiting to be seen, and it's been more than 7 months. So you can get a residency. It is very easy to do. But I would say that in Murcia, being a slightly quieter region, things happen quicker than in Alicante. Again, if you have proven success or proven track record of work, you've got a contract, for instance, or you're retired and you can prove that you're not going to be a drain on the nation's resources, so you're not going to be claiming anything from them, you're self-sufficient, you can self-sustain, but then they're more likely to pass you, and they will do it quicker. But obviously, if they have to do a little bit more digging and make sure that you're not going to become, in a sense, and I mean this in the nicest possible sense, a burden to the state, then they will just do a few more checks to make sure that they can give you residency correctly, because obviously they don't want it to be a point of having so many people sort of claim from them and not providing enough into the economy, because that would be obviously detrimental. So yes, a residency is easy to apply for, and you would find a lawyer or a solicitor, someone that can represent you, who's bilingual, can translate all the paperwork on your behalf. Along with your NIE number, they'll need some documentation with you, from you, and then working with you, they will submit an application on your behalf, and most of the time, I would say 85, 90% of the time, the residency goes through with no problems, no hiccups at all. And it's just, you may need to wait in some areas longer than in others.
Okay, that sounds good. We've had a question in from someone that doesn't drive, and they've asked what public transport is like in the area. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So you'll find that public transport works fantastically well, and you'll probably find this everywhere, but closer to the coast you are, because that's where the tourism is, that's where the higher density of people are located. So tourism closer to the coast is great. Now, if you're starting to go a little bit more inland, let's say, for instance, you want a country property, then you're going to find that bus networks, etc., are not going to be on your doorstep. But from my personal experience, having used the public transport system here, it's a very stable, quick, and efficient system. You're not having to sort of wait hours and hours for one bus. You know, I remember living, again, 15, 20 years ago, and there was one bus every hour. And if you missed that bus, then you had to wait another hour. And that doesn't really happen anymore. I think there's enough people now living in the area to warrant having a slightly more robust bus network system. So getting a bus, if that's something that you need to be conscious of, then we can always make sure, if you're looking at buying a property for relocation or using on a, let's say, on a 4-month basis in a year to escape the winters in the UK, we can make sure that you're near a bus route to places of interest. So yeah, buses are not a problem. Train service, not a problem.
Okay, great. We had a really good question in from Carl. He's asked whether the NIE number covers the whole of Spain. So, for example, if he gets one in Murcia, can it be used in Malaga if he decides to relocate down there?
Absolutely. Not a problem at all. Yeah, NIE number is, again, the best way to look at an NIE number is like having a national insurance number. So it's pretty much the same thing. So you have your national insurance number, you can travel anywhere in the UK, and that number still represents you. So it's exactly the same process here. You'll have a temporary card, and then you have your formal one sent through the post. So obviously you would need to be in the same address, but after that period of time, you can live anywhere in Spain as long as it's mainland Spain, and you'll be recognised with that NIE number.
Okay, brilliant. And we've got a question in from Phil Nicholson, who's asking about cost of living, so utility prices, taxes, all that kind of thing.
Okay, so cost of living, from what I have found, the most expensive cost, which I never would have thought, and then when it was actually explained, made so much more sense, is water. Water is probably the most expensive cost in terms of your utility bills. And the main reason being is it's quite a dry part of the country, quite a dry part of the world. So when it rains, the sanitation process, and also the fact that everybody wants to have gardens, cultivated gardens, etc., means that they have to clean and sanitize the water on a regular basis. And this is expensive to do. So because of that, they discourage people from obviously wasting water to keep their bills lower. Most people, although I have been told that the drinking water, the tap water here is drinking water, I never have personally drank from the tap. I tend to buy my water in bottles. not only to keep the costs on my water bill down, but really to make sure that just in case, no one knows how old the pipework is. So the most expensive utility bill that you will face is water. The second one is electric. Now, most people will have their air conditioning units, especially if it's built, I think from memory now, from 2004/5. All aircon units have to be hot and cold. So what does that mean? It means in Spain, when it's cold in the winter, for the few weeks in the winter when the temperatures do drop, you need to heat your house. And houses, the typical houses built in Spain are quite hard to heat. They're very easy to cool, but they're quite hard to heat because obviously houses are built for the sun, not for the winter. So if you're having to use your aircon to heat your home, that can be quite costly. Also, you'll find that your boilers will be obviously electric, your cooker will be electric, most of your appliances day-to-day will be electric. Gas mains do not tend to, they're not everywhere. So basically the traditional way is to use a gas bottle. You connect the gas bottle, you can connect the gas bottle to a number of appliances like a heater, cooker, boiler, etc. But most people do not want the hassle of having to go and get the gas bottles, which are quite heavy. You can get them from most petrol stations, and there will even be a delivery service available as well. But I think people just want ease and a stress-less life, so they tend to go for electric. So electric is quite widely used, obviously, for everything. For instance, the home I'm living in at the moment doesn't have any gas facilities at all. Everything is electric, and that's quite normal here. If you do have electric, then you do have fantastic and energy-efficient solar panels that you can install to reduce your energy consumption, and in some cases, even sell that energy back to the energy provider. So that's a popular option which most people are taking up as well. The next one I would say is petrol. If anyone drives, the petrol cost, although it's now coming down, was quite expensive, but sort of day-to-day living, if you don't need to have a car or you're going to be using public transport, which is quite cheap, then it's not going to be a huge burden. But I would say the main two factors is electric and water. Food is relatively cheap here. I know a lot of people that don't cook, and they tend to eat out quite a lot. Because of my dietary requirements, I tend to do a lot of cooking. And if you know where the local shop, you will absolutely save yourself a fortune. So we visit a market, which is it's done every Wednesday and every Sunday, and it's for the local farmers. And forget that we can't forget that a lot of the produce for the UK is actually here. It's actually grown here. So you're actually cutting out the middleman, and you're going straight to the source, and you're getting fresh produce on a weekly basis. And it's cheaper than going to the supermarket. So I would say food can be costly, but depending on where you shop, you can reduce that cost sometimes by half. All right.
Okay, there's some good tips there. The next question is from Pavla. Perhaps Fernando, do you want to answer this one? She's asking about the housing prices and whether they're going to drop due to the current pandemic.
Okay, new construction at the moment is still holding the same price. It hasn't been any price drop in any of the new developers that I know we use. But resales, there is a possibility that will drop the price in the next few months, because each person, each vendor is different. You never know their needs or their hurry to sell. So they might be accepting offers. I cannot say for sure. Like I said, each person is different on resales.
Yeah, okay. Ben, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, what I would say with regards to house prices here is this pandemic has really taken everyone by surprise. And I don't think anyone kind of prepped or had anything in mind regarding what could happen in the next coming months. So at first, we, as an area, as a region, thought this would only be for maybe 2, at the push, maybe 3 weeks. But obviously in the second week, the extension came, and then in the 4th week, again and again and again. So At the moment, the new build constructions they're kind of being quite tough, and they're not reducing any of their prices. However, there are some that are offering incentives to buy now. And that could be things like having a swimming pool thrown in for free, which would be the cost of, let's say, €15,000. It could be maybe fitted kitchen where there wasn't fitted kitchen in the price, or maybe they're throwing in the air conditioning, saving X amount. So there are ways where we can try and negotiate a slightly sweeter deal given the current climate and the situation we're in at the moment. In terms of reducing their costs, the new build developers, as I say, are being quite tough, but on the resales, everyone is in, as Fernando said, they're in their own particular circumstance. So if they are in a need and a rush to buy, then yes, you can put in maybe what would be of 2-3 months ago considered as a ridiculous asking price and a bit of a cheeky offer. Then you are more than welcome to try that now, with the hope it could get accepted. There are people that need to sell, they need to pay off their mortgage, otherwise they'll be penalised, and I'm dealing with a case very similar to that at the moment. And there are cases where people really need to come out of their agreements as quickly as possible. So don't let, I wouldn't say wait for the prices to drop, because I don't really think that they're going to drop to the point of it being, tens of thousands of pounds, off a property that's 120, 130,000 euros. They're not going to drop it by 10,000, 15,000 euros. But what they may do is give you incentives to buy. But the more that we can kind of learn from you as to what you're looking for, and the more we can kind of carefully select the right developer that we feel we can negotiate with. So yes, it's a bit of a yes and no answer, but it very much depends on the circumstance.
Okay, fair enough. We've got a question here about rental income. So if you buy to rent the property out, would you pay tax in Spain, or would you pay it in your country that you're resident of?
So as it stands now with the double taxation treaty, you would just pay it in Spain. You would then have a ticket, a receipt to say that you've paid that tax, and then they can't charge you. You won't be charged tax twice. The tax for the tax for people who are non-resident but live within the EU is 19%. The tax on people who are outside of the European Union is 24%. So the difference is a little bit, now, as this may change, this could change, obviously next year, post-December, this could all change. But as it stands, that's what it is now. So that's gross, that's taxable on obviously the gross income. And obviously things like deductions, etc., don't tend to get taken into account so much, but there are ways where you can make it slightly more cost effective and reduce that as well. So if that is again something where you're wanting to purchase a property for the rental income, please get in contact, because we've got some fantastic solutions, which are attracting people from all over Europe, not just from one location. And we really do think there, it's going to sort of hedge your bets. If people are not going to be able to fly for X amount of months, but they can drive into the country, then you want to be accessible in an area where it's easily accessible by car. So.
Okay, we've got a question here about staying in Spain for 180 days per year without becoming a resident. Is that possible?
180 days without becoming a resident. Yes, it's possible. I'm not quite sure if that's, I'm not quite sure of the question, but yes, it's possible to do. But what I can't do at this moment in time, because at the moment nothing has been solidified regarding coming out of Europe and the whole Brexit issue. So you can stay here for 180 days, go back, but then you would have to be back in your place of residence, I believe, for, I think it's 60 days before you can then re-enter into the country. But again, don't quote me on that. So it's not the easiest. Some people think, well, I'll just nip to Gibraltar for a day and then come back, and then that shows I've kind of been out of the country, and then I can come back in. It doesn't quite work like that. And that's obviously, they thought of that and to try and eradicate that from happening. You do have to stay in where you live, let's say, and have to stay there for quite some time before re-entering back into the country. But if it's something where you want to spend vast amounts of time in Spain, the best way to do it would be to act now, to look at getting your NIE number now while the process is simplified, it's understood, and even look at applying for your residency as soon as possible. There are ways you can do it, especially as a property owner, that would work in your favor. And at least then you don't have to toy with that idea. You can stay in the country for as long as you see fit.
Okay, that's great. We've had a question from Alan, who has asked whether the banks will give real estate loans to foreign nationals.
Yes. Banks are quite happily lending, not a problem at all. Most of the, well, in fact, I'll say most, all of the banks will offer a 60% on the agreed price, the agreed purchase price of the property itself. Now, I think there's one bank that offers 70%, but in order to get that, it's quite difficult. The repayments are quite high, and you have to be earning, in terms of your income and your expenditure, you have to earn quite high and spend very little in order to qualify. So on the whole, for non-residents, I would definitely say that 60% is a figure that you should work towards, not 70. And that 70 is quite widely advertised. Very few banks, in fact, no bank really is going to offer a 70% mortgage. So yes, for non-residents, for people living outside of Europe, I have clients who are from China, from America, who have bought investment properties here, and they have obtained a mortgage with no problems at all.
Okay, great. And someone's asked whether the same rules apply on mainland Spain as they do on the Canary Islands. Can you answer that?
I can and I can't. I'm not going to say that my expertise lie on the islands, because my expertise lie in mainland Spain. That's what I've dealt with for many years. I do know there are a few small differences, but we will be having a seminar looking at the Canary Islands and focusing on the Canary Islands with an expert. Rather than me try and answer that question, I'm sure they will be able to answer that question for you. And if you have any sort of particular sort of instances where you're sort of talking about the rental income, taxation, or buying process, etc., if you want, we can speak on a one-to-one basis, and I can try and help you on that basis there. But on the whole, most of the processes are the same, but I know there are a few small differences. But it maybe wouldn't. I'm not the best person to speak to about that.
Okay, that's great. I think that's most of the questions answered now. So unless there's anything you guys want to add, Fernando?
Yeah, well, like Ben's been explaining, the things are starting to get better a little bit now here. We'll be able to leave our properties and go out in the next 10 days or so. So then we will start be looking at and see if there have been any changes. But like we said, the new construction, they seems to be offering gifts or some discount on when it comes to present size swimming pool, like he explained, and the resales are difficult to say. Everything else hopefully will still remain the same, and yeah, we'll just have to wait a couple of weeks and see how we start getting on. Difficult situation it is.
Yeah, sure. Okay, well, I think that's all the questions answered now. Ben, do you want to sign off?
No, I think that's everything for me. For anybody who's toying with the idea, I would say don't hesitate to get in contact with us, because we can start to kind of do the background prepping at this stage while it's quiet. And that will then allow you to be a little bit more concise with your full process once you're able to travel. And we do have clients who are not even needing to travel, and they're actually sort of selecting units from the comfort of their own home. Hopefully in a few weeks' time, we've been told that as of tomorrow, they're going to sort of, I think it's actually today, we can now go out for an hour's exercise and things like that. So they're doing it in a gradual stage-by-stage process. But we will be hosting virtual tours. And if anybody has anything that they would like us to concentrate on, please send us an email. So we'll be actually taking you around developments, properties, areas, etc., to try and give you as much sort of visual information as possible to help in your decision-making process. So this is all kind of done, we're kind of learning as we're going along, but we want to learn from you. So if there's any way at all that we can improve, please send any sort of thought processes you have over to us, and we'll try and implement all of those as best we can. Hello?
Hey, yeah, okay, that's great. Thank you for that. Okay. I think that's all the questions answered. So yeah, thanks guys. That's really, really useful.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Okay, so we'll see you next week. We'll let you know when the next one is. And again, if you've got any questions you'd like for us to tackle in particular, please give us a shout.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye bye.